Selene, a striking yet frail middle-aged woman, made her way slowly from the bedroom to the kitchen, a journey that had become increasingly challenging with each passing day. She approached the dining table, where the full plates were set. It's futile, she thought. Roger's hope that more food would hasten her recovery was ridiculous. Selene had been unwell for 2 months now. A mysterious weakness hindered her movements, making it difficult for her to function normally and enjoy life. Roger had taken her to numerous doctors, but none could pinpoint a cause. However, each morning Selene felt herself growing weaker. Due to muscle weakness, she could barely even comb her hair. All she had wanted was to retreat to her bed and lose herself in a long sleep. Only in her dreams did she feel young and healthy again, engaged in her favourite activities and dreaming of the future. Pulling the plate of salad towards her, fragrant with fresh tomatoes, greens and seafood cocktail, Selene was about to spear a tender pink shrimp with her fork when a child's voice suddenly came from the back door. "Mom, if I were you, I wouldn't eat that." Selene started and turned towards the sound. "Who's there?" she asked, astonished. From behind the door, sniffling and rubbing her nose, emerged a dishevelled girl of about 9, with her hands behind her back. "What are you hiding?" Selene asked. "I'm sorry, but I sneaked into your garden first," the girl confessed. "Then I saw the open glass door and came in while no one was around. It smells so good in here. I wanted to find something to eat." The woman shook her head sympathetically. "What's your name? Where is your mum?" "Lyra. I don't have a mum." "Oh, I see. Come, sit down, take a fork and eat," Selene said, firmly pushing her plate to the little girl. "No, I won't eat that." The girl shook her head. "There's poison in that plate. The man put it there." "What? Why do you think so?" Selene asked, shocked. "He said so. Sorry, dear, but I can't wait for you to die on your own." And then he poured something from a bottle, holding it with gloves, as if afraid to burn himself. Selene froze in shock. Seeing that, the girl added, "Then he took the bottle outdoor. I saw everything. When he left, I took a piece of bread and was going to leave. But then I saw in the window you sitting behind that plate." "All right, Lyra, let's do this. Take another sandwich and sit in that little closet over there. See?" She pointed to a small door under the stairs to the 2nd floor. "And then we'll figure out what to do with you." "Quick, go, he's coming," Selene whispered, hearing her husband's approaching footsteps. The little girl darted into the closet. Selene struggled to stand, took her salad and approached her husband's plate. His portion was noticeably smaller. She decided to swap the plates and see what would happen. He entered just as Selene placed her plate in his spot. "Selene, you're already here?" he asked sweetly. "Forgive me. A phone call delayed me. Wait, what are you doing?" he suddenly asked, his voice changing. Selene gently pushed her plate away and tried to keep her voice steady. Selene gently pushed her plate away and, trying to keep her voice steady, said, "I can't manage such a large portion, Roger. You know eating tires me out, so I took a smaller serving." She moved towards her seat, holding the plate with trembling hands, a mix of weakness and anxiety coursing through her. But Roger quickly approached her and took the plate from her hands. "Selene, why didn't you just ask? I would have swapped the plates for you," he said, helping her sit down. He placed the salad in front of her and scratched the back of his head, looking puzzled. "Maybe we should have some wine," he suggested suddenly. "No, thank you," Selene declined softly. "I'm already feeling a bit dizzy. Let's just finish quickly, Roger. I want to go back to the bedroom and rest." "All right," he muttered, taking his seat. Selene watched him discreetly, curious to see if he would handle the salad she had left untouched. But her husband poked at the plate with his fork and then decisively stood up. "Oh, I completely forgot. I needed to send an email urgently. Well, I'll have dinner in the study then," he said, taking his plate and heading for the exit. "Call me when you're done. I'll escort you to bed." Selene wanted to throw a heavy sugar bowl or an apple at him, but her strength was waning. After forcing herself to eat and drink a couple of sips of tea, she got up. Now she needed to feed the hungry guest sitting in the pantry, and then, "Maybe I should call the police," she thought. "But what should I tell them? I have no evidence other than the words of an unknown little girl." Selene quietly made her way to the stairs and was about to approach the pantry when she suddenly heard her husband's voice. "Selene, have you finished your meal? I'll help you now." He was by her side instantly and took her by the arm. "Let's go slowly." Selene clung to the railing as if afraid that her husband, who had just seemingly tried to poison her, might push her down the stairs and make it look like an accident. She struggled to stay on her feet, breathing heavily, but climbed to the second floor at an unusually fast pace for herself. "Wow, you're quite the speed walker today," her husband joked when they finally reached the top. "Can you manage from here? And I'm going to clean the kitchen." Selene nodded and shuffled towards the bedroom, steadying herself against the wall. Her husband watched her go, then sighed. She heard him go back downstairs, then entered the bedroom and approached the window, but she hid immediately behind the curtain. Roger was already in the garden, diligently burying something and tamping down the earth with his shoe. As if sensing her gaze, he suddenly turned towards the bedroom windows. Selene stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly it seemed audible even outside. Finally, Roger turned away and began cleaning the dirt off his shovel. Selene lay down on the bed. Anxious thoughts painted one terrifying scene after another in her mind. "He won't stop," she thought, chilled by the realization that her husband could take her life at any moment, and all because of her house. Roger owned a printing business, and Selene was his right hand in the business, as she was the one who designed everything. Roger's attitude towards his wife changed dramatically after Odette entered their life. The woman looked as if she were a fairy tale enchantress. The elegant long dress, crafted from flowing dark silk, was embellished with glittering beads. Her hair was elaborately styled, and her eyes were dramatically lined, making them the focal point of her face. Selene initially felt uncomfortable under the intense gaze of the guest, but as they talked, she found the woman surprisingly engaging. Odette placed a substantial order for themed brochures, inviting people to join an organization known as the Happy Life Lab. "What an insightful woman," Roger exclaimed after she left. "She's so knowledgeable and speaks so compellingly." He echoed the guest's sentiments. Selene quickly reviewed the materials and thought the organization bore the hallmarks of an informal religious sect, and when she shared her thoughts with her husband, he simply shrugged it off. "What does it matter to you what they do? Our job is to fulfill orders," he said. "Well, I just don't want to be involved in spreading another cult," Selene replied. Roger only frowned and asked her not to mention it again. Selene did an excellent job with the brochures. They were filled with images of smiling people, cute animals, beautiful parks and cosy houses, depicting the happy future that supposedly awaited those who attended the society's creative meetings. Odette was thrilled and ordered a second batch of booklets, this time featuring herself on the cover as the founder and chief ideologist. Selene transformed Odette's photographs into the image of a true fairy, the kind that both children and some adults dream of meeting. "No, Roger, this still feels wrong," Selene sighed over evening tea. "I feel like I'm visualizing pure evil under this guise. So many unfortunate people will fall for these pretty pictures and empty promises. And then what? They'll hand over their last pennies to Odette? It's none of your business, Roger retorted. It's their problem if they're gullible. We're just a printing house. But Selene stood by her beliefs. She felt that even indirectly supporting evil was wrong. Roger, though trying to appear indifferent, began mentioning Odette more frequently in conversations, quoting her, praising her enlightening and charity work. And Odette herself began visiting their home more often. Despite her charisma, Selene noticed moments when the woman had such a predatory gaze that it made her want to look away. And she looked at their house with that same hungry expression. One day, Roger brought up a strange topic. Listen, Selene, aren't you tired of living in this huge house? Our son is unlikely to return after the college, and it's not economical for just the two of us to live here. Selene looked at her husband in surprise. What are you getting at, Roger? I don't understand. Maybe we should sell it and buy an apartment in the city, he suggested, knowing full well that Selene cherished the house she inherited from her father. Are you out of your mind? Trade our family home with its beautiful garden for a cement box in a high-rise? And why? Do we have financial problems? Selene looked intently at her husband, who squirmed in his seat. No financial problems. It would just be better. Better for whom? Since when is living at Stone Jungles considered better? Unable to come up with a convincing argument, Roger decided to tell the truth. It's just that Odette would be happy to buy the house for an excellent price. She says it's perfect for her residence and her work. And also... So this is Odette's idea. Selene could no longer contain her indignation. She stood up from the table, gathered the dishes, and put them in the dishwasher. She had no desire to talk to her husband any further that evening. Roger was upset. Odette had promised him a partnership in her business, which would significantly increase his income. And naturally, she implied her favour towards him. The man was consumed with the desire to meet her conditions and make the exhilarating leap from being the owner of a local printing business to managing a lucrative organisation that was rapidly gaining national popularity, where money flowed like an endless river, and, mesmerised by the prospects Odette painted for him in their private conversations, Roger found himself agreeing to the unthinkable. A month after that tense conversation, Selene suddenly fell ill. To ensure his wife suspected nothing, Roger played the part of a devoted, loving husband, willing to do anything for her recovery, and for a while he succeeded flawlessly. But the drops that Odette had given him were acting too slowly. Selene's healthy body refused to succumb so easily. Eventually, Roger complained to Odette that he was tired of turning his wife into a vegetable, and the con artist provided him with another vial, assuring him that no one would detect traces of this substance in the blood, and her death would appear to be acute heart failure. He had laced his wife's salad with this liquid that evening. Of course, Selene knew nothing about it. All this time she believed Roger's claim that he deeply regretted his proposal to sell the house, and that ever since she fell ill, he realised how terrified he was of losing her. People will say anything to achieve their goals, Selene thought, suddenly getting away from the window. Oh, how is little Lyra? She must be waiting for me to come and let her out. It's unsafe to stay here. We should leave together. The corridor was dark. Only a narrow strip of light stretched from her husband's study. The woman could hear him talking to someone on the phone. Selene quietly began to descend the stairs, holding a bag with documents, bank cards, and a change of clothes. Her hands trembled from the adrenaline rush. Her heart pounded, but she felt an unusual surge of energy. Opening the pantry door, Selene heard the girl sleeping peacefully, curled up on an old chair. She had a hard time waking the child. "What? Who are you? Where's Grandma?" the girl asked sleepily, but Selene pressed a finger to her lips. "Shh, Lyra, shh, they mustn't hear us." Selene took the girl's hand and led her to the back glass door in the kitchen that opened into the garden. They quietly walked along the wall and finally reached the gate to the neighbouring yard where an elderly couple lived. Finding herself in their yard, Selene sighed with relief and knocked on the door. "Selene!" Margaret exclaimed. "You look terrible. Come in." The elderly woman led the unexpected guests into her cosy kitchen. "How is your health? Roger said you were very ill."
"Oh, Margaret," Selene sobbed. "Actually, we're hiding from Roger."
In disbelief, the neighbour shook her head and Selene told her story. "What a scoundrel!" Margaret sighed, listening to the story. "It's dangerous for you to stay with us, because Roger will come here first when he notices you're missing. So, Selene, think about where you can hide for a while." Suddenly, Lyra, who seemed to be dozing and hearing nothing, said in a sleepy voice, "Let's go to my grandmother's. She lives not far from here, in the next village. I went into the forest in the morning, got lost, and that's how I ended up at your place." "So, you have a grandmother, and you just left without telling anyone?" Selene asked in surprise. "Because I'm looking for my mum. Grandma said she abandoned me. I wanted to find her," Lyra exclaimed. "Oh, you silly girl," Selene muttered. "Your grandmother must be worried. All right, come on. Let's go to your place. Maybe it's for the best. Roger and Odette probably won't look for me in the nearby village." She called a taxi and Margaret placed dishes of fresh pastries on the table. "Come on, girls, have a quick bite. You must be hungry from all the nerves." Selene politely declined. She was too anxious to eat, but Lyra eagerly dug into the food. "Delicious," she said with a mouthful. "My grandma hasn't baked in a long time. She's sick." The taxi pulled up right to the neighbour's gate, and Selene and Lyra climbed into the back seat. Selene marvelled at her newfound energy and zest for life. Could this encounter with Lyra have such an effect on her? At Lyra's grandmother's house, a police car was parked outside, and villagers were gathered around. Helen, Lyra's grandmother, stood at the door, loudly lamenting.
"What have I done? I couldn't keep my only granddaughter safe. I've lost my dear little one. Why did I tell her about her mother?"
Her neighbours spatted her head, trying to console her. The local police officer attempted to ask her questions, but she waved him off. "I don't know. She's got a mind of her own, just like her wayward mother. She up and left without a word." Selene thanked the taxi driver and opened the car door. The villagers finally noticed the arrivals. "Granny!" Lyra rushed to her grandmother and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, Granny. I didn't think you'd cry so much." The elderly woman, seeing her granddaughter, was speechless. Selene stood nearby, unsure of what to do. She had already let the taxi go, but would this grandmother let her into the house? Finally, after all the hugging and wails, the grandmother looked seriously at Selene. "And who are you? From the city police?" "No, It's a long story, but your granddaughter basically saved my life." "Really?" the old lady exclaimed. "Where else did she get involved?" "Nothing criminal. She said she got lost in the woods and ended up in our village. She was hungry and climbed into our garden to find something to eat." The grandmother looked reproachfully at Lyra. "I ought to give you a good spanking. Who taught you to trespass in other people's gardens?" Lyra hid behind Selene. "Granny, don't be mad. If it weren't for me, Selene's husband would have poisoned her." The elderly woman gasped, and Selene had to explain everything. At the end of the story, Helen looked closely at Selene. Aren't you Samuel Clark's daughter?"
"Yes. Have you known him?"
"Oh, he had quite the temper, God rest his soul. Well, come in. I have something to tell you," the elderly woman said, rising and leaning on her cane as she walked into her house. Helen recounted that in her youth, Samuel Clark had courted her. Then he was drafted into the army. Helen waited for him and began preparing for the wedding. However, malicious gossip spread lies about her, claiming she had been with other men. "But I was always a modest, shy girl," she said. "I never allowed anything like that with anyone else, and I didn't go out while he was away, only to work. Just before the wedding, he confronted me, demanding to know who else I had been with. I burst into tears, but he accused me of lying and said he didn't want a tainted wife. That's how our wedding fell apart. He left for the city, and soon after, I realized I was expecting his child. I cried and then also moved to the city. I couldn't stay in the village with such shame. There I gave birth to Lyra's father, Alexander. I raised him and educated him, first as a paramedic, then as a doctor. He turned out to be quite industrious, working as a doctor on expeditions to the Arctic. He didn't marry until he was 40, always too busy. 10 years ago, he introduced me to his wife. He said, 'Meet your daughter-in-law.' I was so happy that I left them our apartment and returned to here to give the young couple space. Then my daughter-in-law had Lyra, nursed her for about 6 months, and then ran off with another man. And that's how it is, dear."
"Wait," Selene whispered, astonished by the story. "Does that mean your son is my half-brother and Lyra is my niece?"
The grandmother smiled. "Well, yes, I suppose that's true."
Selene felt overwhelmed. What a crazy day! And what else would it bring to her?
As if answering her question, the front door creaked open, and a deep male voice called out, "Mum, are you home?"
"Oh, Alexander is back," the elderly woman exclaimed. The little girl dashed outside and threw her arms around a bearded man. Behind him stood a shorter man in glasses, seemingly a friend.
"Meet my friend, Professor Jeremy Gonzalez," Alexander introduced him. "I'm an associate professor," Jeremy corrected with a smile, looking at Selene. "Oh, boys, I and Lyra also have a guest," Helen said. "Meet Selene. She lives in a nearby settlement."
After everyone was introduced and seated around the quickly set table, the elderly woman retold her old story. Alexander was shocked.
"Mum, why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you say my father was a polar explorer who disappeared in the ice? I went on all those expeditions to honour his memory."
Jeremy patted his shoulder.
"Don't be upset, Alexander. At least you found true friends on those expeditions, and you brought one of them here to meet such a charming sister."
Selene blushed, and then felt a sudden assurance they would protect her from Roger's schemes. When the men heard her story, they sprang into action. With their extreme connections in law enforcement, that very night, the street in front of Selene's house was illuminated by the flashing lights of police cars, and handcuffs were secured around Roger's wrists. Selene guided the investigators to the garden, pointing out where her husband had been digging. Soon they discovered a vial of potent poison, rubber gloves, and a portion of vegetable salad with shrimp. It wasn't long before Odette and her 2 accomplices, who had been helping her defraud elderly people of their homes, were also apprehended. The con artists were brought to justice and received their deserved punishment. Alexander and Jeremy decided it was time to end their adventurous expeditions and settle down in the city. Alexander wanted to spend more time with his family, his daughter, his elderly mother, and his newly discovered half-sister. Jeremy, on the other hand, wanted to be closer to Selene, who had made him believe in love at first sight. 6 months later, Selene and Jeremy were married, and she moved in with him. Now, they had even more opportunities to see Lyra. Selene had grown to love her as if she were her own daughter, and naturally, they frequently visited Helen.